What's up, YouTube? We are in episode 7 of the Troponin episodes. We're going to be talking a little bit about some health kind of prophylactic measures, especially with regards to blood pressure, and then we're going to talk a little bit about injury management as well. So we did get a question about different blood pressure management agents, which ones can be more effective, if there are any other systemic effects that can actually be favorable or unfavorable. Major ones that we hear about a lot are lisinopril and
lisinopril and telmisartan,
yeah.
but maybe like a little bit more broadly, you usually talk about ACE inhibitors, which lisinopril is, versus ARBs or angiotensin receptor blockers, which telmisartan is, which has become super popular. And then I don't know much about them, but Justin, maybe you can touch more. There's also calcium channel blockers and beta blockers, both of which aren't used as much by bodybuilders. But
yeah, there's diuretics also.
Yeah, and just
there
like
is
for some
another
context,
class that rarely gets used, but
okay. Well, like for some context, I've been taking lisinopril as like kind of a preventative prophylactic for probably a year now, and it keeps my blood pressure in a good range. It's always like 120 over 80ish. But I recently switched to telmisartan as well, because I think basically because I think it does everything that lisinopril can in terms of modulating blood pressure, but because of its impact on the RAS system, I think it could also prevent a little bit of the excess water weight gain during a rebound. And so I thought maybe that'd be a little bit better choice. But Justin, I'm curious to hear your thoughts because I'm sure you've had tons of clients use one or both.
Yeah, and first of all, to preface it, I'll explain what, because it drives me crazy. All these bodybuilding deaths, and it's almost always things that's linked to blood pressure. So unfortunately, and it seems like we're finally past this as a sport, but for years I have clients who were scared to get on blood pressure medication. It's like they hear pressure and they get associated with strength, or I don't even know what the association was, but people were always worried about lowering their blood pressure. So what happens is, like you're a closed system. I mean, blood can't leave. It goes from your heart and has to come back to your heart. So when the pressure goes up, that means your heart is pumping against a bigger pressure. You can picture yourself like blowing water through a garden hose or something. When you got to blow really hard, it's tiring. And the heart is a muscle like any other muscle. You work it against a heavier and heavier weight or a higher pressure, the muscle's going to grow. The problem is the heart, like your bicep grows, it grows out. The way the heart muscle grows is it grows inside the cavity. It makes the cavity smaller, which isn't good. Up to a point, it doesn't really matter much. But when it gets smaller, then it has to beat faster, and then it's beating faster and doing more reps against a higher pressure. And eventually, what will happen is it's struggling with that, and it's struggling to keep up with fluid circulation, and it'll start to swell, and that's called a dilated cardiomyopathy, and that's kind of the last-ditch effort to save itself, and it dilates, and eventually you get into heart failure. And what heart failure is, it doesn't mean like your heart failed. It means it fails to keep up with the circulation requirements. So fluid builds up in the body, and eventually you get pulmonary edema, and you die. And if you notice, like all these people who die in the sport, you'll hear so often, like they thought they had pneumonia, or they're just dealing with a kind of cold, or they got walking pneumonia, and that's what it is it's that fluid building up from the pulmonary edema from the heart failure. And so, but more importantly, what happens is the kidneys. And so the same thing, you have that higher pressure, the blood goes through the kidneys, and there's glomerular filtration capsules that filter out the toxic, the things that need to be excreted out and keep the water in, and that's like this whole filtration system. You can kind of think of it like a piece of paper, a coffee filter. Well, you have high pressure, and it rips little holes in it. That kidney stops working as well, and eventually that kidney stops working as well. It doesn't filter as well. It allows larger proteins through, which you'll get protein in your urine, and that exacerbates the issue with the heart. And it's a whole big negative feedback or feedback loop that works into itself. And so that's why you need to keep your blood pressure under control, and that will save almost all the issues people have as far as major health issues with the sport. And so now, like, to the different types of classes, most things medical, which is nice, is they're really kind of self-descriptive. And so ACE inhibitors, angiotensin converting enzyme. Well, angio, it's like heart, and tensin kind of sounds like tension, or so what we're doing is we're inhibiting the angiotensin converting enzyme, that thing, that heart tensioner, kind of, you can almost think of. And then the ARBs is it blocks that receptor. So those are really the two best cases, I think, for bodybuilding. And an interesting thing is they could actually potentially improve your bodybuilding, because what they do is they kind of end up increasing the blood flow to the microvasculature. It's not really gonna like Cialis or Viagra. Technically, they were actually designed as blood pressure medications, and they'll dilate all your blood vessels, your big blood vessels, and then I mean, depending on, some guys, their big blood vessels down there, some guys are smaller, I guess, but they, eventually they realized some of the blood vessels that they dilated had a beneficial other side effect. But the things like the ACE inhibitors and stuff, they'll dilate the microvasculature. And so, you can't spot reduce, but you also can't oxidize fat without blood flow. And so certain areas like your glutes, there's not very much blood vasculature there. And so they don't get a lot of blood flow. You take something like an ACE inhibitor or an ARB, you could potentially increase the blood flow to that area, and you could maybe help get, oxidized fat from that area at a higher rate than you normally would. There's some other weird things, like the COVID actually is, you're more likely to get severe reactions to COVID when angiotensin is not or when angiotensin is inhibited, the converting enzyme. So there's linking to ACE inhibitors and worse cases of COVID. I don't know that that's the case with ARBs. I don't think it is, and I don't know why. What would be different about it? Can you guys hear that? You asked me my marker. That's okay. So the microphone's doing its job because it is loud over that way. And the kids, I don't know what they're. I think they're having I think they're trying to be rock stars with pots and pans right now. But sorry.
Well, what else would you want to be doing on a Monday night?
I would probably be studying for the upcoming school year. I mean, that, or like writing notes about how great my dad was.
Probably that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So those are what I would recommend: an ARB or an ACE inhibitor, lisinopril or telmisartan. The other classes, what you would probably want to avoid as a bodybuilder or a strength athlete would be beta blockers. So everyone kind of knows ephedrine or clen. Those are beta agonists. So there's beta receptors throughout the body, and they're kind of like the go receptors. The action of fatty acid oxidation at the cell involves binding to a beta receptor. So there's beta, it's easy to remember. There's beta 1 receptors in the heart because you have one heart. There's beta 2 receptors in the lungs. You have 2 lungs, and there's kind of like beta 3 receptors throughout the body. And so a beta blocker, what that does is blocks that agonism up. You want to block the receptors in the heart to slow the heart rate down so the heart's not beating as hard and as fast. The problem with that is that it limits your cardio output. It limits your output in the gym because you can't get your heart rate up. The other problem with that is it's basically an anti-ephedrine, anti-clen. So it's going to be harder to keep your body fat down. And there's also some weird like anti-catabolic, anabolic benefits to beta receptors. And there's a lot of studies, especially in women, that show clen has a decent amount of anabolic action. So you want to avoid those. The other thing you deal with, especially like large bodybuilders, and I see this, and I think doctors don't really even expect this. I see a lot with carvedilol. I'll see, for whatever reason, that one especially, like a lot of my powerlifters, my 340-pound guys with terrible sleep apnea, and they got a lot of problems going on. You're 340 pounds. Those guys
yeah, it's not just sleep apnea. There's a lot.
Yeah, and they're taking stuff that's not good, and they don't have any cardio because they consider 5 reps the high. They consider 5 reps and above cardio. Well, so the doctors will put them on carvedilol, and their sleep will get terrible because their lungs, like from the beta blocking of the lungs, and so it's like taking the opposite of an asthma medication. It's like making themselves asthmatics almost. And so I'll see their sleep apnea get way worse. So I really try to avoid beta blockers, especially carvedilol. Atenolol is kind of more mild, and that one's not quite as bad. But if you can avoid them, avoid them. The other ones would be like calcium channel blockers. And most people, I would pick that second to an ACE inhibitor or an ARB, but that's like amlodipine. But some people get like water retention from that for some reason. There's other versions of it. There's a cardizem, I think, maybe is a calcium channel blocker that tends to not. There's another one that's used for another disease that if you have to be on a calcium channel blocker, I can't think of the name. I think it starts with a C. But if you have to be on 2 medications, that's what I would recommend. And then the final one that's commonly prescribed is a diuretic, and you'll see that a lot. Lisinopril with hydrochlorothiazide, telmisartan with hydrochlorothiazide. It'll be like Cozar, Hyzar, or Hyzar is Cozar plus hydrochlorothiazide. You'll see that combo a lot. You really don't want to be on that if you can avoid it. And it's not like because people think diuretics and kidney damage. If the blood pressure is going to damage your kidneys, being dehydrated is harder than your kidneys. But if the doctor puts you on a diuretic, it's because you're the opposite of dehydrated. All this stuff that's going on with your high blood pressure is decreasing the ability of your body to filter out fluid from the body, and so you have excess fluid retention. And so the diuretic actually just brings you back to baseline. There used to be a blood pressure medication that raised growth hormone levels. It was
Interesting.
yeah, and it was like I think it was maybe a maybe a dopaminergic, because it was actually before pramipexole, cabergoline, bromocriptine. It was one people were kind of looking at as a possible. Well, back then no one really thought about prolactin; they were all calling it progesterone. But people were trying it for that. But it actually could. It had like some studies show an increase in growth hormone. But that's interesting because that's actually fairly common. That whole growth hormone pathway, because you can see some studies that'll show increased levels of IGF-1 on ACE inhibitors, which is why I traditionally had recommended lisinopril. Because every once in a while you'll read these studies and you'll see they don't. It's not like they test it very often. It's like that's part of the study, and they don't care about that. But you'll see every once in a while that they'll worry about it as an increased risk of cancer, because when they do a full blood work, they'll see elevated levels of IGF-1 on people with lisinopril. And obviously we don't want cancer, but bodybuilders will often take the risk of cancer if it means elevated IGF-1 levels.
So I think lately, like the last few years, telmisartan seems to have become really trendy. Maybe I shouldn't say trendy.
No, it's trendy. It's very trendy.
I mean, there are probably good reasons for it, and I decided to try it out because I thought maybe it would have a little bit more positive effect on reducing water retention, especially during the rebound. But do you think it's warranted how so many people are starting to choose that over lisinopril, or does it really even matter?
If your blood pressure's in line, I think you can make the argument it's better than lisinopril. And I'm not gonna, if it keeps people from killing themselves, either of them are fine. Telmisartan might be better. If your doctor has you on lisinopril and your blood pressure is properly managed and you don't have any issues, I wouldn't say don't change. It's not. If there is a benefit, it's not enough of a benefit to even worry about. But I mean, either one's fine. And ARBs are really getting moved. Losartan is another common one. I see all the time doctors switching people from lisinopril to losartan. Although a year or two ago there was a weird recall for losartan, and I can't remember what it was about, but I know there was a recall, and I really don't remember what it was. I think it was an adverse effect that they hadn't planned on with losartan. But losartan's been around forever, so. And I haven't heard anything since then, so I don't know what the deal was with that. It might have been like a manufacturing issue.
Yeah. If anyone listening is like broke or really pinching pennies and you hear talk of all these drugs with fancy names and you think that you can't afford it, that's not the case. Lisinopril and telmisartan, and I think most of the other drugs, are extremely cheap.
Yeah.
And not that we would know firsthand, but if you really don't want to go through a doctor, because doctors are a pain in the ass, they're quite easy to get elsewhere, still for very cheap.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say it. If someone doesn't like it, to potentially save someone's life, alldaychemist.com, blueskypharma.biz. Go on there. You can get telmisartan from a European pharmacy, an Indian, Pakistani pharmacy. It's like $19, I think, for like 30 pills at 80 milligrams, which you probably could divide in a quarter. You're talking like $12 a month or less to save your life.
And right. I mean, would you agree that of all the things, I mean, you've said before that you can be pretty stupid with certain things with PEDs and still be relatively healthy. But to me, it's like if you're not keeping your blood pressure in check, you could be killing yourself.
That's what kills bodybuilders.
It's such a reflection of so much organ function, and our organ function is absolutely vital. And I think that's probably the thing that people miss out on the most too. Is like the blood pressure is one metric, but it reflects a whole bunch of other stuff that the body needs to have happen.
But pay attention. Cedric McMillan telling people, I think he's got pneumonia. National Somebody had pneumonia. Matt Porter was dealing with pneumonia. It's always, it's time after time after time. I just talked to him. He said he was dealing with some kind of chest cold, but he thought he was getting better. You'll hear that. Oh, I mean, it's so sad because you hear it over and over and over and over and over, and and they'll say heart attack and because that's like a doctor will possibly like there's heart attack, which is myocardial infarction, which is the actual arteries, the coronary arteries to the heart get blocked and the heart doesn't get oxygenated blood. That means that's the tissue that dies off. But they'll call like a heart attack like a heart failure type thing, or ventricular fibrillation. What'll happen is your heart gets dilated cardiomyopathy, and the contractility isn't very good. And so there's a pathway, it starts in the atrioventricular, like AV node, and it works through the bundle branches, and there's a path that the electrical signal has to take to contract the heart, because it's all an electrical signal. And that gets disrupted, and it doesn't work as well, and it can get into something called fibrillation, where it'll fibrillate and it doesn't pump blood really at all. There's no structure to the contraction. It's just contracting, just kind of squiggling. And they'll call that a heart attack also, but it's not a heart attack like a heart attack. It's a heart attack linked to this whole process we keep talking about. But you'll hear over and over and over again these people talking about chest colds, dealing with pneumonia. It's not. It's the end stages of this process of elevated blood pressure causing dilated cardiomyopathy and renal failure, leading to pulmonary edema, which presents itself as pneumonia symptoms. And it's just, you keep your blood pressure down and all that's avoided. And you can be pretty stupid with gear. You can take too much. I mean, really, it's avoid orals and keep your blood pressure in line, and don't use tren unless you have. Don't use tren outside of contest prep. And boom, you can be pretty stupid. Injectables only. Avoid tren. Avoid orals, and keep your blood pressure in line. And you can push the envelope. You shouldn't. I mean, you really shouldn't, but you can for quite some time and come out unscathed on the other side, relatively unscathed. But
so to wrap this topic up, now that we've talked about a bunch of prophylactic drugs, but are there other things that people can do? Like, say you have someone in my position, like big bodybuilders trying to get bigger. I will be pushing my body weight up. I will be taking stuff. Like, just anecdotally, I feel like the HIIT cardio that you have us doing keeps me in good shape cardiovascularly. It probably helps to keep our blood pressure in check as well. And I think like there's this trend among the whole like IIFYM crew saying, the foods you eat don't matter as long as the calories in line. But I do feel like I feel healthier. I feel like my blood pressure is better if I stick to clean foods, especially when we're pushing calories high. Like, I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think that eating 5,000 calories of clean foods is the same as eating 5,000 calories of the same macros of shit.
And it's beyond just the macros. There's more involved in macros. There's all the microplastic stuff that they're finding out, and they're like discovering more and more all the time. We're learning, like, it's something crazy. Like, we eat a credit card worth of plastic every year. That stuff's that's not coming from free range chicken. That's coming from processed foods. There is more involved, and like there's 9 calories per gram in fat, but fats are not just fats. Like trans fats are different than the healthy fat you'll find in an avocado, or the healthy fats you're going to find in nut butters and nuts. There is a difference. There's more than just just the macros. Like if it fits your macros, yes. If you think that's all there is, but there's more than just the macros. And we had a podcast with, I think it was John Meadows and Phil Biz like 7 or 8 years ago. And we talked about it, and that was where, like, if it fits your macros, it seemed like it was really starting to peak. And even, like, a lot of coaches were using it and stuff. It's like, yes, from a thermodynamic standpoint, they're more or less the same. I still think there's still some variance, because it's how that macro gets into your bloodstream. The macro has to go from your hand to mouth to the tissues. And the way that happens is slightly different, like whether it's a sugar or a complex carbohydrate, yada, yada. But aside from that, we have, like, the average male's testosterone level is plummeting. The average male's taint size is shrinking. They're finding all these things with microplastics, and all these things are correlated to us as humans having 100,000 years or more of eating a certain type of food to now, in the last 50 years, eating foods that have been developed and processed and manufactured in a way that we have never learned, we've never evolved to deal with. And aside from that, they're including things we have never evolved to eat at all, which is like plastics. And plastics are like oil. I mean,
Yeah.
plastics, that's what, like are made from petroleum. It's,
I mean, gosh, even just walking through the airport the other day, we passed a family, and there were a couple boys, probably 12 and 14, that had like moobs at
yeah.
12 and 14, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like hormonally, that that is such a problem.
Yeah, that's like setting you up for a bad life.
Yeah, I mean, you think about not only from the physiological standpoint of just like physiologic function, but even just the self-esteem and everything that comes with that. You think about how your self-esteem is going to influence life choices. Those life choices add up cumulatively. I mean, like, hate to say it, but like what you eat plays out in more than just what you look like. It's so much more than that. And so you see these kids, and you're like, you just can't help but wonder, like, oh my god, like.
And even worse, as a evolving species, with these plummeting testosterone levels, you get plummeting sperm counts. And we're going to have like a global. I mean, like developing countries still have 50, 70 years or more before they'll reach what we are as first world countries, or or like the beyond first world countries, which would be like us and Japan, and really just us and Japan, maybe China. But you're seeing with plummeting testosterone levels and plummeting sperm counts, like people in Japan, the Japanese are not getting pregnant. They're not. They're not. And we're starting to see that more and more in America too. Like birth rates are plummeting, not because people are choosing to have less kids, because it's harder to have kids because men don't have sperm.
Well, there's a reason that so many fertility treatments. I mean, gosh, with his job at Amazon now, they have fertility treatments covered as part of their health insurance. And I'm like, for that to become part of like a standard within big tech, that that's indicative of a larger problem. And especially in an industry where, hate to say it, most of those guys are not exactly super fit. They're not exactly taking great care of themselves. They're spending a lot of time behind a computer. They're probably not careful about what they eat. So you think about what their hormonal profile looks like, and it just makes sense where you're like, man, that's got to be, yeah.
Yeah, so there's more. Yeah, it's more than just the macros. I mean, it really is. I always say, pick it, kill it, grow it. That's how we ate for the entirety of human existence, except for the last few years. If you couldn't pick it from a tree, grow it in a garden, or kill it with hunt it for meat, you shouldn't be eating it. It's not what our bodies are meant. Even if even if you break down the constituents and the macros are the same, the micronutrients and the other things are just not what we have evolved to thrive on.
And isn't there like a big change in short-term gene expression too? Like, doesn't that have a high influence on epigenetics for even when you do have kids, like your progeny take on your kind of acute epigenetic profile?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I won't claim to be an expert on that at all, but there's, God, I wish I knew more, because I actually was reading something not that long ago that was really interesting about that. Yeah, but
And that'd be really fascinating to talk about at some point.
This is a bit of a tangent now, but I'm curious. So, like on the pick it, kill it, grow it topic. So on your high days, you do say up to half of these carbs can be, well, you call them sugary, but it includes like starches you wouldn't usually eat too, like bagels, bread, whatever. Do you find any difference among your clients in either like results or health or both among people who, I mean, I guess if people tell you exactly what they're eating, people who choose like, say, fruit for their extra carbs, or who just eat more rice versus people who eat candy and juice? Because like I certainly feel better. Like most high days, I'm getting like 2/3, 3/4 of the carbs from rice, and then the rest of it is like usually fruit, a bagel
like
here and there. Yeah, raisins, banana. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was hoping you were going to say it, but you eat the right stuff. Yeah, and it's not like I don't have 10,000 clients to run like a legitimate clinical study on this, but inflammation. And I've been slowly like tracking this for a potential article at some point, or to discuss it further. But I'm really noticing, and I've been trying to track it and tracking trends. My clients and again, I don't ask everyone exactly what they eat, but from what I get and when people talking about it, I see, like when I say much more frequently, I mean I don't think I see it ever in the people who eat fruits as their sugary carb source, but people who eat processed Twizzlers, Skittles, and processed sugars complain about feeling inflamed on their high day, or feeling achy or inflamed, or like they wonder if they have a fever. They think they're getting I feel like every high day I swear I think I'm getting sick. And I don't, like I said, it's just, it's short-term data with my clients, but I do notice quite a bit of a difference where, not that every client who eats candy for their sugar has that, but it seems like the clients who complain about asking questions about inflammation, or should they feel inflamed, or should they feel achy on high day, like 100% of those people are not doing fruits as their sugary source. It's really an interesting thing that I don't have enough data on yet, but will eventually.
I'm guessing you see similar among people with regards to like their cheat meal choices, because like just using myself as an example, if I have 2 high days, usually the one on the weekend is like a little bit junkier if it's going to be, or a little higher calories.
But even
certainly.
our
we still
junky cheat meals are.
we still home make most of our food, but then the one midweek will be like a lot of times it's like a steak and a potato, or maybe I'll have burgers, but I'll like make them at home, or something that's not just crazy.
Yeah, I see even weird. Sorry,
go ahead.
I see even weirder things. Uh, people in other countries have a different spot to their cheat meals, and I think it's the way we process wheat. Like my Mexican clients, or my clients in like in India, or where else do I see it? But they will, like, their high bready type wheaty cheat meals. They don't have any. They never say anything. Where I'll get a lot of complaints about GI distress, diarrhea, feeling achy, from those same foods in America, which is most of my clients are, probably 90% are American, or the UK, and I'm sure 90%, but it's, I, 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 again, I hope I'm not like trying to create this data, because it's, like some of these things are like three clients, and like a pretty small data set, but it seems like my American clients, when they eat like any non-fruit, any non, like, pick it, kill it, grow it foods for their cheat meal, or for the high day, for their sugary foods, and then always their cheat meal, it seems like they have these inflammation problems. Where like someone in Mexico, or where's my one client? Well, like Latin America, South America, or like India, they'll eat those same things. They'll eat breads and stuff, but not have the same complaints. They won't complain about inflammation, and I think it's the way that the wheat is processed. But again, small data set.
I wonder how much of it too might be like a baseline level of inflammation. Where like one of the things I use with pain science a lot when I'm talking about things with people is like, if you think about, there's a on a graph, there's like a bar where below that bar you're asymptomatic, and above it you're symptomatic, basically. And towing that line between asymptomatic and symptomatic can be something very, very small. So you almost wonder if like the baseline level of inflammation of people in America, because so much of our other food is processed, might be elevated, so there's less clearance between our baseline and above the symptomatic.
Yeah, that would make sense too. And it's hard too, because inflammation is like, how do you measure that? Like it's like
everyone thinks they're inflamed.
Yeah, but you, like, it's just this thing, people feel like kind of achy, or like I say, like, I feel like my bones hurt on high day, or I swear every high day, I swear by the end of my cheat meal I'm getting sick, but then I wake up and I'm not sick. And so like the inflammation is just the best term I can give for that. But I think definitely, like, just as a general rule, we're probably much closer to that popping above the, popping into the symptomatic level. But so it's all these things, but it's something I've definitely been noticing, like, more and more. And as like as the years go by and I had a larger data set, it seems like people in Latin America, they'll go out and eat, like flour tortillas, they'll eat breads and stuff through their high day for their sugary carbs, and not have an issue. Still, like, if they can process food, like fully processed, Pop-Tarts or whatever, the issue will pop up more. But it seems like just in general that issue pops up far less. Seems like in America, whether it's processed sugar, whether they're doing bread, whatever, more often they're complaining about inflammation. And again, it's not 100%, but it seems like all the people in America, it seems like a pattern I'm noticing, and I don't have more information or data on it. And that's my best guess, is it's the way it's processed, and the fact that all that other stuff in the process, the microplastics, and so I think it's a combo of the wheat
I will say too, so before I had my gallbladder out, I had what was called gastroparesis, and initially that was what they thought the gallbladder was the problem. It wasn't. But I will say that having worked with you and cleaning up my diet quite a bit to stay very, very clean, so like I have no issues whatsoever anymore. And I think it has a lot to do with, again, how the body processes, even just that kind of enteric nervous system, and how it's influenced by the chemicals that we ingest.
What's crazy is, like, it's like humans were so weird, because everyone knows that. And I have a client, Nick Hugo, if you're listening, really good, really good client, awesome kid. Uh, like he's really changed his whole physique and like learned to enjoy nutrition and stuff. But he's notices a clear difference of how he feels. Like, you know, he ate poorly his whole life, ate, you know, junk food, a typical American diet, you know, and so I think early on, like the switch to like the right food seemed hard and like not fun. And we're like, we finally kind of finished his diet and switched to more like an off-season approach. And, you know, like right away after like I gave him a string of high days, you know, and he immediately just felt terrible. And he, you know, like texted me like, I can't believe I ate that way. And when you've eaten correctly, like healthy, and you go back, you wonder. But it's just so convenient and tastes so good. It's so easy to drift towards that. And those issues, the inflammation and the achiness and feeling terrible, kind of builds up slowly. So it's not like I eat one fast food meal and I feel terrible. It slowly builds up, and by the time you get into that, it's hard to switch back because you're eating fast food every day. Even though I feel terrible, I don't want to go back to chicken and rice.
You know, it's funny because I think after our show, so for me last week, and then even for Dave after his show, is like we wanted food for like a day, but then after that, we were both just like, we really just want our, like, I just really wanted a big bowl of cream of rice. And Dave just wanted his normal chicken and rice meals. And I think, like you said, like once you get used to eating that and you feel better on it, like you really, it doesn't take long to get those cravings out of the system.
Yeah, it's funny because there's memes all the time. It's like, you know, like making jokes about, you know, my body, like my body staring at that cup of water while I eat another.
Drink your coffee.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and you know, it's like we all know it. We all know that you're going to feel. It's just weird how it's so hard to make that transition. But once you've done it long enough, it's really weird because, you know, I've been out of the sport for a long time and know, you know, like I don't follow. I mean, for a long time, I still followed a real detailed plan because I was overweight as a kid and I didn't want to go back to that. But now I don't really weigh my food. But I still, if I'm making them food, it's still I'm making meat and rice. You know, I still.
How much of that is like, so we've talked a lot about like the dopaminergic effect of like knowing you did the right thing or the better decision, even if it doesn't like feel right at that time, but you condition yourself to choose that dopaminergic kind of pathway through your choices, and then that becomes a desired outcome. How much of like your food choice, like, do you see
Yeah,
what I'm
no,
going with that?
yeah, probably. Even if it's subconscious or not, it's yeah, and
Yeah.
I think and that's the problem is it's and we've talked about it sometimes. It's so I try to get my kids. It's so hard to understand that because getting to that point takes many right choices that didn't feel the greatest. You have the fun choice and the right choice, and you have to avoid the fun choice many times and the right choice before you finally get through that feedback loop to realize like, oh, I feel good all the time. I'm not. And I remember working when I was an echocardiographer, and I worked with all women, and so they were always curious about my diet because I ate so much, and you know, and like, and they just always complained about being tired. They were always like, you know, and like everyone's tired, you know, but if there's different like tired, there's like whether I've had a stimulant recently or whether I'm just like worn down, you know. And I remember like trying to like explain to them like, no, yeah, I mean, I could like I want to take a nap, but I'm never like out of energy. Like I'm never like weak or you know. And I just I know, and because they thought it was crazy that wouldn't drink coffee all day or I didn't need coffee by the end of the shift. And it's not like I'm not like a caffeine junkie. I love caffeine as much as anybody, but I don't need, you know, there's a difference between being sleepy and being like weak and exhausted. And I'm sleepy all the
Yeah.
time, but there's never like, if I need to go do something, I can pop up and go do it. You know, like we had to move a patient. And part of it might be the fact that I was muscular and had the strength, but it's just, if I, at any point, I could be like half asleep, you know, if someone, hey, gotta go walk 3 miles, you know, like, yeah, you could just do it. Cause you like you're well fed, you're eating proper nutrients, you know, like say like even these podcasts, it's not like, you know, this is nighttime. It's not like any of us are like steaming with energy, but there's a difference between being sleepy and having the right nutrients in your body to fuel like the energy processes that require muscular movement or and it was really interesting seeing the difference working with you know because they all ate terrible, they all you know munched on candy and just the typical American diet, you know, and it was really interesting seeing the difference of like 'cause there's like non-stimulated, there's sleepy and there's like tired, no energy, and you could really see the
Right.
difference.
Yeah.
Dave's sleepy.
Well, I think that's a good. I think we're both sleepy.
Yeah, did you want to do the injury topic or just be done there?
We should probably just be done there. That was good.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let me stop this.